Can I thank the Minister for her statement this afternoon? That brings us to the Select Committee statement. On behalf of the Business and Trade Committee, Byrne will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions may be taken. At the conclusion of his statement, I will call members to ask questions on the subject of the statement, which should be brief questions, not speeches. Can I emphasise that questions must be directed to the Select Committee Chair, not to the Government Minister, albeit they may well be on the front bench. And front benchers may take part in questioning. I call Byrne.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and let me express my gratitude to the Backbench Committee for making time for this short statement today as the Business and Trade Select Committee publishes the Government's response to our flagship report on economic security, which was published in the summer last year. I want to start not with committee papers, however. I want to start with people, with workers and with businesses, because it was just in April last year that we found ourselves in this place on an unusual Saturday hearing to ensure that British Steel was a business that was kept alive. Not long thereafter, we had our agencies supporting the high street retailer, Marks and Spencer's, as it suffered one of the worst cyber attacks in our country's history. Not long thereafter, the Exchequer was required to underwrite to the tune of £1 billion the Jaguar Land Rover supply chain as it suffered a cyber attack of unprecedented proportions. All of this took place while our allies in Holland were battling over Nexperia chip supplies, and our allies in America were battling China over rare earth restrictions. 5 shocks, but one message. One message, which is that economic security threats are now a concern to this country's security. And the message from our Select Committee is that these threats are going to multiply significantly in the years ahead. The combination of AI-powered weapons, the advent of hostile states, the reality of unpredictable allies, and the need for us as a country to mobilise something like £100 billion worth of new foreign direct investment, all together means that the threat surface confronted by our businesses is about to multiply exponentially. And that is why we need as a country new economic security defences, because if we have learnt one lesson from Russia's illegal invasion in Ukraine, it is that economic security is the foundation of national security. And so just as we need a whole-of-society approach to defence, so we now need a whole-of-society approach to our economic security too. That is why the Select Committee undertook its review last year, and our conclusions were stark. We found that the institutions, the policies, the posture, the funding, the laws, the regulation that we now have in place means that we do not have an economic security regime in our country which is fit for the future. And so what we set out to do is to provide a blueprint for how government could overhaul the system that we have in place. We recommended, like our allies, putting our regime on a statutory basis with a cross-government minister for economic security, a proper centre for economic security at the centre for government. And we then made a number of recommendations for how we could improve the diagnosis of threats that we confront, how we develop the sovereign capabilities that we need as a country, how we diversify our supply chains and our sources of critical minerals, how we defend our critical national infrastructure against new perils, how we deter those seeking to damage us economically, and crucially, how on earth are we going to dovetail the efforts of His Majesty's government and the private sector and the work of this country and our allies around the world. Those were the recommendations that we made to government, and today we publish for the House the government's response to our report. Let me start by saying to the Minister on the front bench that we welcome the constructive tone that the government took in response. We realise that this is a novel field of policy, it is fast-moving, and where we end up at the end of this Parliament will be very different to where we are currently residing today. The government has accepted, clearly, 4 of the recommendations that we made, partially accepted 11 of the recommendations we made, but I lament that they have rejected 10 of the recommendations that we made. And so, for the benefit of the House, let me canter through those very quickly. What we felt was good about the government's response, published today, are some clear principles that will guide our economic security policy for the future. We had lacked those until today. I'm glad that we now have them in black and white. We welcome the commitment that the government makes to stronger alliances. We welcome the promise of tougher deterrence, particularly from Companies House to bad actors. And we welcome a slightly half-hearted commitment to stronger parliamentary scrutiny of this field of policy in the future. Where the committee has concluded the government made some progress but hasn't gone far enough were in these areas. First, although there is a promise to improve forecasting of future threats, led by the Department for Science, Industry, Innovation and Technology, we felt that the commitment was just a little bit too vague for our taste. Second, we are sorry that the National Exercising Programme does not have a clear commitment to bring together the public and the private sector to war game the kinds of threats that we know will come together. We're not going to face one threat after another. They will compound and hit us all at once. That's why we need business and government to be working together to scenario plan for the future. We welcome some of the progress on critical minerals, but frankly, we don't think that the money or the strategy that is put in place is up to scratch. And so the committee has concluded in a report that it published earlier this week that an inquiry into critical mineral security will be one of the inquiries that we undertake this year. In the field of cybersecurity, we don't think that the recommendations on software standards and cybersecurity standards were really heard, and we would like to see more progress on mandatory reporting of cyber ransom attacks. We didn't feel that the government has made yet a clear commitment to develop anti-coercion systems or instruments. We welcome what the ministers have said about the need to get something in place. Our allies already have this infrastructure in place. We welcome their recommendation that they will listen to us in this House and on our committee, but we would like a little bit more specificity from them. And then finally, we simply don't think that there has been enough progress on controlling foreign subsidies. The CMA has been endlessly consulting on this for the last 2 years, at a time when Chinese industry is 6 times over-subsidised compared to European industries. We don't think there is a strong enough regime for policing a level playing field in competition, and we think that imperils our manufacturers. And nor do we think that the Trade Remedy Authority is fit for the modern day, and that significant reform is going to be needed. What I suppose we lamented most is where the government rejected our recommendations, because here we felt, as a cross-party committee I might add, we had some common sense proposals for ministers to consider. We regret that there is no clear plan to overhaul government coordination and leadership in the way that we had when it came, for example, to counter-terrorism policy after 7/7, and indeed when it came to economic security policy back in the 1920s and the 1930s. There was actually a resistance to publish a clear list of the sovereign capabilities that we'll need as a country. Now, I had to say, I understood from defence ministers at the time of the Defence Industrial Strategy that there was indeed going to be a clear, specific list of sovereign capabilities that we as a country were going to need to develop. Today's government response says that no such list will be published. We regret that the managing public money framework will not be updated to take into account the need for investments in resilience. The government response said that the current regime was adequate. That is clearly a nonsense when ministerial directions are needed to ensure the subsidies that were delivered to British Steel or the underwriting that was delivered to Jaguar Land Rover supply chain. It is quite clear that the managing public money framework today does not give ministers or officials the right framework for balancing the security needs of our country and the growth objectives of the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. We remain concerned that the tax incentives for improving the resilience of small business are not adequate. We lament that there is no backstop for the cyber insurance market, and we regret that there is no extension of the brilliant pool re to provide that insurance for the future. And it is quite obvious to us that the pay scales for our frontline specialists in the war on economic crime are simply not adequate. So, look, we look forward to continuing the dialogue constructively with ministers, and I do want to welcome the tone that they struck and the progress that we have made. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me just conclude with this. Over the last year, as we have set about our work, we have heard consistently from our allies fears, concerns about the economic security regime in this country. We have heard loud and clear from our allies that they worry that the UK is the weak link in the Western defence when it comes to economic security. If we believe, as I think we should, that economic security is the foundation of national security, that is not a position that can go on. The fact that our allies tell us on the committee that they worry we are the weak link in Western defence is not something that our country should put up with. And it's not something this House should ignore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman has given a very thoughtful series of recommendations with his committee. Can I ask him on the specific point he made about trade remedies and countries that are over-subsidising, such as China in terms of electric vehicles flooding our market and European markets? How much of that is being led in terms of joined-up government by a foreign policy that just doesn't recognise economic security and is prioritising in the Prime Minister's recent trip to China, trying to reset relations with some countries regarding economic security as an inconvenient truth?
For that question. And look, it is an open secret in this House that every day, every week, there is some controversy between the growth departments in government and the security departments in government. But if we're going to stand on our feet in the years ahead, we've got to make sure that our industry is fighting fit and is not being undermined by unfair foreign competition. Now, we were grateful to the OECD, who met with the committee in Paris last week, who set out in black and white the sheer scale of over-subsidies in China. The fact that Chinese industry is subsidised 6 times more than industry in Europe tells us that the playing field is not level. And yet the CMA has been consulting without conclusion on control of foreign subsidies for almost 2 years. And we learned loud and clear from allies in Europe that the divergence of UK policy on China with European policy on China may indeed confound the ambitions of some of us to draw closer to the European Union in the future. Now, I know that is not a view that is shared across the House, but it should give ministers pause for thought.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. And I'd like to thank my honourable friend for the work that he does on the Business and Trade Committee, and I'm a proud member. Does he agree that the increasingly competitive and uncertain world defining the UK's sovereign capabilities and supporting them through the National Wealth Fund is vital to strengthen our industrial resilience, secure our supply chains, which includes critical minerals, to protect British economy?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I salute the work that the honourable lady does on the committee. Our committee is far stronger for the contribution that she makes. But, you know, the bottom line is that the government, in strategy after strategy, has said that sovereign capabilities are important, that they need to be developed, and what we have in the strategy and the response that's been published today is a very clear statement that they're going to remain secret, that we're going to publish a few of them in the Defence Industrial Strategy. Maybe if there's a defence equipment plan that is ever published, we might see more of it in there too. But the point here is quite stark. If we're to ensure our economic security is stronger in the future, we've got to mobilise the private sector and private sector investment consistently and at scale over a long period of time. It's impossible for us to mobilise that money unless the private sector knows where to invest. If we keep the list of sovereign capabilities secret, then how on earth are we to send the right signals to the private sector to invest in the future?
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Gentleman and his committee for an excellent report that speaks to some very real issues. We have an opportunity later this year when the Defence Readiness Bill comes before Parliament for consideration. Would he have any recommendations about what he would like to see in that bill? And is he and his committee talking with the Ministry of Defence to make sure some of that gets into that bill?
For the honourable member's question, what we sought to do when we published the report is compare to the regime that we have in this country with the regimes that are in place in amongst our allies in Japan, in Europe and in the United States. And what became very clear is that unlike our allies, we have a loose collection of strategies which some might unfairly label strategy by stapler, which are basically collated together, but which lack any statutory basis to ensure consistency and persistence over time. Now, again, remember what it is that we're trying to do, Madam Deputy Speaker. We are trying to ensure that public and private sector are able to work together on big risks over a long period of time. But if we leave policy unpredictable, inconsistent, subject to the changes of wind each day, then we can't provide that signal. So making sure that there's a proper statutory basis for economic security in the way the honourable member suggests and in that way that our allies have actioned, I think would be a significant step forward in the bill that he refers to.